think we'll get going slowly into this presentation. Thank you for showing up. This is the pitch workshop for the Proteus innovation competition. We have about 11 people that have shown up, so I hope it's one from each of the teams at least is showing up. And if you've never been part of this competition before, then this is great. This is sort of an introduction to pitching to investors discussion to set you up for your pitching for the Proteus competition. Okay. But before I get into that, just to remind everyone that this is the pitch workshop, and then the pitch competition is on the 31st. And when I get to the end, I think we'll be sending out information about where you'll be working with your local office, your local tech transfer office, to work to practice your pitches. So you'll want to do that before the pitch competition. Give it well before, if you can, a week before or a number of days before. Give you a chance to get the feedback, take it in, and make any adjustments you need to make. Okay, well, we'll talk a little bit about that more. So, of course, as always, thanks to our partners for this pitch competition: Western, McMaster, University of Windsor, University of Waterloo, University of Guelph. This is the little engine that could. Start off with Western, but it has expanded to Southwestern Ontario. And we're delighted that the other universities and their tech transfer offices have joined us in, really allowing the public a chance to think about and to consider ways of commercializing technologies that come through our offices. These are all real technologies that have come through our offices. Thanks to our sponsors for this pitch competition. Without it, without the sponsors, we wouldn't have the prize money, which is really why, we know that's why you're here. And that's fine. A little bit of education and a little bit of inducement, and we have ourselves a pitch competition. So this is great. And really, the way this works, you have a very good chance of coming away with the prize. So good luck to everyone. So this is the Proteus pitch competition, and let me just remind you that this is a small group. But I am in PowerPoint presentation mode, so I can't see everybody that's on the call because I have you reduced so I can see my slides. So if you have a question, feel free to just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. That's the easiest way. So, I want to talk about pitching, and I want to talk about specifically where does the pitch fit into the whole technology development? We talked about business plans before, but I want to present where do we use pitching and why do we use pitching and why is it so common and why are there so many pitch competitions? Okay. So we want to put this in context of technology development and getting investment. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the context of the pitch, the structure of the pitch, and the different structures used for different occasions, whether it's a full investor pitch or a 30-second elevator pitch. There's some similarities, but there are some important differences. I'll give you a chance to test your own ideas on this, and you get a chance to practice on one video that I have. But otherwise, we'll just go through it. Okay. So just to remind you, last time we talked about the business plan, and it was structured around a framework called product market fit. And this is a key framework for business model construction, but it is also a key framework for pitch construction. And so, what is your new technology? What does it do? What's the unmet need that it fills? What problem does it solve? Who has the problem? Customer. Which customer are you going after and why? And what does that market look like? How many possible customers are there? And then, importantly, what is the value proposition to the customer? Why is the customer going to change what they're doing now to solve the problem in order to adopt the new technology because it's superior in some way? And so those are all, that's key for the business plan, but it's also important to get across as part of your pitch. The other thing we talked about was your path to market. We talked about how there's 4 common pathways to market, and it depends a little bit on what category you're in. Certain areas of business have common pathways to market. So I gave example number 3 is sort of a biotech pathway where a early idea goes into a startup, they raise money to develop it to a certain point, phase 2 clinical trials for a therapeutic, and then it's licensed into a commercialization company that finishes the commercialization process. And that's true for biotech products, but every industry has its own path to market. And I think I gave an example of the Fluzo bypass adapter. And that was an example of, difference in scale. The Fluzo bypass is a great little plastic widget, but its scale means that it really is a line item in someone else's catalog. So it needs to be licensed into a company that will do the commercialization, whether it's licensed initially or a little later on. That's the ultimate goal. But some technologies can support a business, in which case, you can take number 3 or number 4. We can become, do a startup, commercialize the product, sell the product, and that product can support the business. So it depends on, you need to match the commercialization pathway to the commercial potential of the technology that you're considering. Just a reminder, you've already completed the 4-page business plan where you describe the market, you define the problem, the customer, define the size and scope of the problem. You talked about your technology and what it does and why it's better than what's currently out there and why the customer will value it. And then you described how the technology gets to market. So not surprisingly, that same structure you're going to use in your pitch. So yeah, just we're going to use the same structure, but I want you to think about the goal, because you don't have 4 pages to do that. You got to do that in a short amount of time. And so just keep in mind the goal, the information that you're trying to get across. And that's really the whole point of this program, is creating viable commercialization strategies. So when you're pitching, you want to pitch the idea that you have a viable commercialization strategy. You've got product market fit, you understand the pathway, and this is your strategy for commercializing the technology. You want to understand how the technology allows for a new product or service that's needed in the market and valued by its customer. You want to identify a sustainable business model. You have product market fit and you have revenue. Right? You know your numbers, you understand the potential market size and revenue. You understand the scale of what you're doing. And you understand the pathway and how you get it to market. So that's what you've already covered in your business plan. And now you want to convey that information in your pitch. So pitches come in all shapes and sizes. We'll talk a little bit about that. Anything from a 2-hour deep dive with investors, where they go through every aspect of your idea, anyway to a 30-second or 10-second, elevator pitch while you're standing beside someone at a networking event. And that may be your introductory pitch or your introductory opportunity to convey what you're about, what you're trying to achieve. So for any pitch, there's two things that you need to understand. And this is sort of the big idea behind pitches. Who is the audience? And what's the desired outcome of the pitch? For example, if I asked you, this is an example of a pitch. If I asked you, what kind of pitch is this? I say, it looks like a sales pitch. And you're right, it is a sales pitch. So what's important in any pitch? Who's the audience? And what's the desired outcome? So in a sales pitch, the audience is the customer. That's critical, because from a customer, the desired outcome is a purchase. That's what you're going after. You want them to pull out their wallets, give you the money in exchange for your product, whether it's an old used car or a plastic widget that you sell on late night TV. In either case, you want people to buy the product. It's very transactional. It's not necessarily a long-term relationship. The desired outcome is the transaction. Get the money, sell the product. Sales is critical to any business. And without sales, of course, you don't have a business. But sales pitch isn't really what we're talking about here. But we are talking about pitches. So this is a bit more representative of what we're talking about. So, to the two critical elements of a pitch: who's the audience and what's the desired outcome? So feel free to unmute. So I'm going to ask you, who is the audience in this case versus the customers in the previous case? Anyone can go ahead. No one? No one wants to unmute? Can you unmute?
Aaron says the sharks in the chat.
Yep, that's right, Aaron. It could be sharks or dragons. I can't remember which one this is. I can't see your chat, so feel free to unmute for any of the questions. So you're right. So that is sharks, or as we like to say, investors or potential investors, right? You have someone pitching to investors. So now what is the desired outcome? Two things you need to know. Who's the audience? In this case, it's investors. And what's the desired outcome? Anyone? It's a bit of a trick question.
Is the desired outcome to secure an investment?
Well, ultimately, but the immediate desired outcome of your pitch is not an investment. And that's the big idea, right?
Would it be to communicate your product then?
Absolutely. Communicate product market fit, why it's a great idea, why it makes sense as a business, right? Why it makes sense as an investment, why it's a fantastic opportunity for the investor. So when you pitch to investors, ultimately you want an investment. But that's not the way it works, even on Dragon Den. That's not the way it works. They promise an investment pending due diligence. So they always have that caveat in there. They may pony up to put in a few $100,000, but they don't just pull that out of their wallet and give it to the guy. It's not like it's different than a sales pitch, which is strictly transactional. A investor pitch is, oh, that's an interesting idea. I really like this. I want to learn more. So the desired outcome of an investor pitch is called the tell me more response. And there's been whole books written on this when you do pitching. Ultimately, you want the investment, so you have to make sure that is going to happen. But that doesn't happen in an investor pitch. What happens is they go, oh, this is fantastic. I want to learn more. I want to find out more information before I make my investment. So that's the secret. The secret to a pitch is know your audience and know the desired outcome. In an investor pitch, it's always tell me more until you get through the due diligence process, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And the difference between an investment and a sale is that an investment, the investor is not only providing money for the business to develop whatever the technology is, it's developing a long-term relationship with the entrepreneur and the innovator. And so not only do they want to understand what the technology is, but they want to understand a little bit about you and who you are and what you represent. So that makes it quite different than a sales pitch. So who's the audience? What's the desired outcome? The desired outcome is tell me more. But what does this whole investment process look like? Right? So let me just describe it very quickly. It usually starts off with a one-page non-confidential summary of your technology that you send around to many investors saying, we're looking for investment for this technology. Here's a very brief description of the highlights, why we think it's a really interesting opportunity, and we're looking for an investment. And so it can also be a 30-second elevator pitch at a conference where you're going, hey, this is what we're doing. We have this great technology. This is what it does. This is the market it's going after. This is why it's so valuable. What do you think? And then you're going after the tell me more response, right? And then tell me more response leads to what we're talking about right now, which is an investor pitch. This is the standard Guy Kawasaki 10-slide, 20-minute pitch. You go through that, and at the end of 10 minutes, they don't give you the $1 million that you're asking for. They go, that's really interesting. I want to learn more about it before I do an investment. So tell me more. That's what you're going after. And then you're invited to go into a deep dive meeting. We call it a technology pitch, or it really is to get a deep understanding of not only the technology that you're working on, but the business plan and the business model by which you're going to commercialize the technology. This typically takes 2 hours. It may involve more people than were in the original pitch, other people from the company that are going to do the investment. And then at the end of that, what do you get? Well, you don't get the investment yet, but you do get tell me more, right? Because at the end of that, you now go, yeah, we're really interested. Now we got to check out all the boxes. We have a process to go through in which we do due diligence. And it's formal due diligence. And it involves deep dive with lawyers into your IP. Make sure your legal structure, your incorporation is all done properly. Take a look at the technology. Make sure you have product market fit. Make sure the value proposition is well understood. Make sure we look at the team. Do you have all the people you need? Are there any gaps? What's the plan to fill the gap? There's always gaps. Let's have a plan to fill the gap. What's the potential valuation if everything works out? What does it look like? And then at the end of this, if everything works out, then we go, yep, we love this idea. We're going to do the investment. So the important point is what you're doing in this competition, this early stage pitch, is a screening tool for investors. So pitching to investors, and what you want them to be excited so that they go, oh, tell me more. I'm really interested in that. So that means, when you do your pitch, you don't need to have every single little bit of detail here. You need the highlights that get to the tell me more response, that get me really excited about what you're doing. So you're going to find, just in the way we've structured this, the business plan that you've written and the pitch, and where we've talked about product market fit, commercialization plans, that same structure applies to every pitch that you will ever hear. When you go hear pitches, it's always going to be a similar structure. So a traditional investor pitch deck looks very similar to what you've already worked on. You have a problem in the market, you have a customer who has the problem, you have the solution, your novel technology, you have an execution plan to develop it and get it to market. And then, of course, it's an investment pitch. You're asking for an investment. What are you going to do? And that ask is usually dependent on your execution plan. So if I just, this is the standard pitch is one that Guy Kawasaki talked about, one of the old gurus of how to pitch. The 10, 20, 30 rule is 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. That was good when he came out with that, but as everyone knows, pitching has evolved. And really, a lot of pitches are not 10 minutes anymore. Some of them are 5 minutes, some of them are 3 minutes, really, because it's really still a screening tool. And the idea is to present the highlights that capture people's imagination and get to the tell me more response. So a traditional pitch deck structure, right? So if you're doing your 10 slides, if you had a 10-minute pitch and you're doing 10 slides, or if you had a 20-minute pitch and you're doing 10 slides, actually, if you had a 10-minute pitch, you probably wouldn't do 10 slides. It's kind of a lot, but it depends how quickly you speak. This is what the traditional investor pitch deck looks like. You have some title, logo, introduction, contact information, a way for people to get in touch with you so they know who you are. You cover off the market. What is the problem or need you're going after? How is it currently handled, and why is that not good enough? Who are the customers? What does this market represent in terms of size of market, potential number of customers, potential value to that market? What is your solution and why is it better than what is currently on the market? You're better, faster, less expensive, something about it gives it value to the customer. What is your financial model? What is the revenue potential if everything works well, your development plan works well, and the assumptions that you make work out? What's the potential revenue model? What is your size, your market? What does it look like? And then how do you get to market? What is your plan for developing this technology? What are the major hurdles you need to overcome? Do you have regulatory hurdles that you need to overcome? Do you need FDA approval for what you're doing? Or do you need just to meet certain engineering standards, and then you're all good to go? Who are you? Who's the team? Who are the members of the team now, and what gaps are there, and what are the plans to fill the gaps? And then what is your development program look like? So in an investment pitch, as I want to just separate things out a little bit, when you're pitching to a bunch of venture capitalists, you really do want to have what your program looks like laid out in the flow chart, where you've done a tremendous amount of homework to look at timelines, milestones, and budgets. Because when you ask them for funding, what you're asking for is based on what this program looks like. That's a little different than pitch competitions, than what you're doing here. In a pitch competition, you sometimes have an ask, and that is, how this product is going to succeed, and how you're going to take it to the next step, and maybe what you would do with the funding from the pitch competition to advance your cause. There's different ways of tackling them. But if you're pitching to VCs, you need to have a solid development plan. Just as an example of that, if this is an example for a biotech development plan, I understand I need to manufacture the product. I have this manufacturing occurs at different scales, and both engineering scale and good, it's called GMP, good manufacturing process, which is required before you go into the clinic. And you have to do stability studies, and that's all laid out in the manufacturing section. You're gonna have non-clinical PK, PD, toxicology studies that need to be done. And if all that works out, you then submit your IND to the FDA and you start your clinical development plan, phase 1, single dose, multi-dose. And then if that works out, you can start your phase 2 clinical trial after FDA approval. And if that works out and you show safety and some efficacy in your model, in the clinical, in your patient population that you're going after, then you could probably exit with a M&A or a deal to a pharma company. That's what this would look like. This is a 3-year budget, $16 million. I would ask for $16 million. If they were blown away and they really liked the opportunity, they would say, yeah, we totally agree with that. Here is $2.5 million for your first year, and let's see how you do. If you do well, we'll commit to the rest of it, but we're going to give it to you over time. Okay. So this is a key slide that you need when pitching to investors. This isn't necessarily required for a pitch in a pitch competition, but I just want you to understand that if you ever jump from pitch competitions to investors, having a product development program laid out is really important. Okay. So what should a really good pitch communicate? Well, honesty. So aside from product market fit and your path to market and all the technical details that we talked about, you're doing a pitch and you're going to do a question and answer. So investors really want to make sure that, you know what, this seems like a good guy or good woman, person's, the team that's up there pitching the idea. Are they honest? Are they credible? Are they resourceful? And they get after that by looking at, the quality of the pitch, the quality of your understanding of the technology and what it takes to get it to market, and how well you answer the questions. If you don't know an answer to a question, just say you don't know. If you don't know the cost of something, just say you don't know. If you can look something up and say, I'll get back to you, that's perfectly fine. What's not fine is pretending you know something or making numbers up. Don't do that. Be very honest. do your homework, be very credible, show you have some resourcefulness. You know, you've already, if you're pitching to an investor, they want to see, well, where have you gotten now? Like, how did you get to where you are now with, you know, your winning pitch competitions or working with incubators or accelerators? How have you managed what you've done so far? Are you resourceful? They look at all of that. Are you logical? Do you make wise and pragmatic decisions when you have to make decisions about how you develop your product? Leadership. Leadership is about not knowing everything because you can't. It's about attracting people to your team because you're excited about it and you get the people around you excited about the opportunity and you can lead a winning team. So leadership is really about that ability to attract people to get on board and have everyone row in the same direction because, you know, you have an objective to meet and you got everybody working hard to meet the same objective because they're inspired by the opportunity. And humility. They're looking for people that you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to be willing to learn and to take advice and to really listen to what investors or stakeholders or customers or your other team members are saying and take it under advisement. Realize that, you know, you don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. And in fact, if you come across as the smartest guy in the room, that usually puts investors off. We're looking for people who are, there's some humility there. They're looking for a glass half full, a glass that they can help fill and add wisdom to the glass, not one that already thinks it's already full and there's no room for improvement. Want to connect with investors. So there's multiple ways to connect. One is emotionally. What is the problem in the market you're trying to relieve? What's the unmet need that you're going after? There's usually a customer pain point, and you want to be able to communicate that and say, I have a solution for this customer pain point. And it could really, you know, make a huge difference to this customer population, which means they're really going to value it and they will adopt your solution. But, you know, connect with them on a rational. You know, your business model makes sense. You've done your homework. The market sector makes sense. The value proposition makes sense. And of course, financially. Got some revenue models. You know that, you know, you can guess that the revenue is reasonable, your cost is reasonable, there will be margins, and there's a potential to scale. So connect with investors. So I've talked a little bit about the content of a typical pitch, which is your 10 slide, 20-minute pitch, 15-minute pitch. What you're doing is a little bit more condensed. So we talk about, you know, just to sort of recap, in pitching to investors, you start off with some type of teaser or elevator pitch. You get to tell me more, you get to do your actual pitch, which you now know is a screening tool because you can't possibly do due diligence on every idea that you hear. So you need a way to screen them to find those ideas that are most attractive. And you go into a deeper dive pitch and finally due diligence. So you're increasing in scope, details, time, and costs for reviewing each one of these things. It takes more time and energy to do that. But if you flip that around and you look at it the other way, you know, when you're pitching, you can't present your entire data room of information, and nor would you want to, and nor is anyone interested in listening to that. So what you need to do is you need to, as the pitch gets more and more condensed, you want to focus on those things that are the most important for that technology or that opportunity. What's the need? What's the market look like? Why is your solution better? Why will your customer value it and adopt it? How do you convey that in a short amount of time? It's helpful to understand what investors want. What do they want to hear? We talked about know your audience, understand the desired outcome of the pitch. Well, you know your audience is investors, and the outcome is tell me more. But what are they looking for? What do they want to hear? So I've already covered it, actually. They want to understand how your business provides a product or service needed in the market and valued by its customer. It really is that simple to say. It's not necessarily that simple to do. And so when you are constructing your pitches, you're trying to get that down in an efficient way. And we'll talk about that. They want to understand your business model. Product market fit. How are you going to make money? How are you going to get this to market? Your revenue stream. Know your numbers. You know, if you present numbers, you didn't make them up. You got them from somewhere. Know your numbers and all the assumptions that went into them, because people will often ask. And they want to understand your commercialization process and how you get your product to market, budget timelines and milestones if an investor pitch. For example, an elevator pitch, 30 to 90 seconds, you usually don't have any props. Your goal is tell me more, right? It's the same goal. But the approach is to connect through an engaging story. You have some kind of small little hook, 1 sentence hook, if you can do it. You want to make sure there's no jargon. When we're developing technology, people often get infatuated with how the technology is different. How does it work? How does it do what you say it can do? But the customer doesn't really care how, as long as it works. And so you really want to focus on what the customer wants, and the investor, convince the investor that the customer really wants it. So avoid jargon. Make sure that they understand the value of the product in terms of what the customer needs. If you go to University of Waterloo and you present to the Velocity Incubator, it's a 3-minute pitch, right? That's not very long. They want to understand what's the problem, what's your solution, who else is in the market, and why are you superior? What's your team? What have you done so far to date? And if everything works, what's the potential future? What's the blue sky look like? 3 minutes. So just as an example, I would say start with some hook. And I give this as the first sentence in a book by Judy Picoult called Singing Home. So this is the first sentence. And it's, one sunny, crisp Saturday in September, when I was 7 years old, I watched my father drop dead. Really dramatic, right? But what it does is you go, well, why? What happened? I want to learn more. It gives you that tell me more response. You want to go, well, what's going on? Why did that happen? That's the idea of a hook. If you go to Creative Destruction Lab and you get in there to help with your technology development, this is at U of T, or it's around the world actually, but there's one at U of T. They start off with a 90-second pitch. And this is what it looks like. Captivate with a great introduction, 10 seconds. This is the hook. You don't have to introduce yourself, just grab the audience attention and say, why they should care. Often this is a story from the perspective of your customer because they have this big problem and you're there to solve it. And you want your audience to relate to the problem and be relieved by your solution. Then state the problem, 25 seconds. Show you've done your homework, that you understand the level of this problem, the numbers behind this problem, how many customers, what's the impact of the problem, why is there a need for a new solution. Discuss your new solution, your technology, why it's so great, why it's better than what it's out there. What evidence do you have that your market is real and that they care? And this is where you've done your homework and you've interviewed 100 customers and you know that the customer really cares about this new solution. And then wrap it up with a great closing line. So that is structure of a 90-second pitch, right? It's always about the problem, who has it, customer, what does that market look like, what's your solution, why is it valuable to the customer and so that they will adopt it. And how can you convey that in a simple way that grabs our attention? And so the CDL structure to a pitch, I think, is a great way to structure how to convey the information. But it does come down to storytelling a little bit. So we've talked about pitching in general. We've talked about knowing your audience, getting the tell me more response for an investment pitch, how the pitch, where it fits into the investment process. It's a screening tool, right? And you want to make sure you got that tell me more response and you get to the next step. We've talked about structure of a 10 or 20-minute pitch down to a 90-second pitch. And it's really focusing, as it gets shorter, it gets more and more focused on the most important thing. So now I want to try to focus it down to one statement or one sentence, two sentences maybe, but one statement. How can you get the pitch for your technology down to a single statement? And the reason this is a really good exercise to work on is it forces you to really think what is compelling and what is most important about your technology and the opportunity it presents. Being able to say that in a clear way and creating, this is called a value statement, and creating that, it's not easy. It takes work to do this. But it's really worthwhile, because once you have a value statement, really, as the time that you have for a pitch expands and gets longer, you just add to it. But when you know that the core, most important things about your technology and the opportunity it presents, if you can fit that into a value statement, it really sets you up for having a really good pitch and putting it into a really good pitch. So what is a value statement? So it typically has three components. What is the product or service? Who's the customer or user, or what's that market represent? And what value does it provide to the customer? Okay, that's it. It's easy to write about, it's hard to do. Okay? But it's well worth the time putting into creating a value statement. Let me give you an example. So this is an example of a coronary stent, right? These were invented about 30 years ago, roughly. So let's pretend we're 30 years ago, and we've just created this coronary stent. And we're going around trying to say, hey, I have this prototype and I want to develop this into a new product and I'm looking for investment. You know, what is a coronary stent? Well, it's a new alloy, nickel titanium or nitinol alloy. And that's got, the reason that's important is, you know, it has superior physical properties. It allows the metal wires to have something called superelasticity. They can bend, they can move around. Remember, when you put a stent into someone's arteries, you've got to enter through an aorta, fish it up into the heart, into the coronary artery of interest, put it in, then you have to expand it, go from this state to this expanded state with a balloon by putting pressure into the balloon. Then you release the pressure and the stent stays open, doesn't collapse back to where it was. It stays open because it has shape memory. So it has superelasticity. You could make a coronary stent out of stainless steel. It could never get around the corners to get into your coronary arteries. So superelasticity and shape memory. So it allows coronary artery placement and it holds the artery open. Okay, that's all well and good. But how do we come up with a value statement for that? Right? So remember, product or service, who's the customer or user? What value does it provide to the customer? Just as a organization. The nitinol stent allows an interventional cardiologist to provide their cardiac patients with a life-saving treatment alternative to open heart bypass surgery as a minimally invasive outpatient procedure. That's one sentence, but it gets across the idea that we have a new product, we have a customer, we actually have a user, which is the interventional cardiologist, and the person who's going to receive the stent, which is cardiac patients. So if I'm an investor and you tell me you have something for cardiac patients, well, I already know there's lots of cardiac patients. So I already know that market is pretty big. And then you're telling me it's life-saving. Well, that's a value statement, so I know it's valuable. And it's an alternative to what's already on the market, which is open heart bypass surgery, which I know, that takes it takes a week in the hospital, and it takes months to recover because it's very invasive surgery. This is minimally invasive, and it's an outpatient procedure. You go in one day, you go home the next day. Essentially an outpatient procedure. So I know that, wow, if this works as well as open heart surgery, but you can go home within a day, that's amazing. That tells me the value of the product and why someone would want it over open heart bypass surgery, assuming it works as well. Of course, you would figure that out through clinical trials. So that's the value statement. But what did I not say in the value statement, right? What I said was, product or service, customer, user, the value of why it's important. But what did I not say? I didn't use any jargon or try to minimize it. I didn't say superelasticity. I didn't say shape memory. I didn't say how it does what it does. I just said what it does is valuable, and it's self-evident that it's valuable because it's life-saving, and it's an outpatient procedure that could work as well as open heart bypass surgery. So it's not about how things work, it's about the value that they provide to the customer. That's what you want to get across. So now, I'm going to ask you to listen to a little video, and you're going to get a chance to come up with a value statement. You want to understand what is a product or service, who is the customer, and what value does it provide to the customer. This is a very short video. And it's a video of the scientist who comes into the office and says, I have this great new invention. And you're trying to figure out what is it, who cares about it, and what is the value statement that you can come up with this information? So you can see it's just 2 minutes, and then I'm going to ask you to unmute after that, and then we'll talk about it.
A great idea for a business.
That's exciting. Tell me about it.
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
Huh.
Sorry.
That's a little confusing. Can you dumb it down for me?
Sure. What I do is I take a proprietary isomer that I developed with a picric acid wash that hollows out the carbon bonds and replaces them with a nanotube wrapping.
Okay, so I guess it's pretty technical.
Oh yeah. I've been working on this isomer for 9 years.
So what's the business idea?
To sell it,
To who?
everybody will want one,
What for?
so they can wrap their volatile organic compounds in carbon nanotubes.
I think you might need a target customer. I don't think I need to wrap my compounds in your nanotube.
Well, maybe not you.
So, for people who buy it, what's the value you are providing them?
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
You've said that already. This is getting annoying. Why should anyone care about your isomer?
I spent 9 years on this.
I know that. Okay, pretend I'm an investor. How can I make money off your product?
By selling it.
You're a smart guy, but try not to think like a scientist. Think like a business person.
Okay. Value chain. Term sheet.
I have to go now and answer that.
That's not your phone.
I know.
Okay. So maybe now if everyone can just unmute themselves. Can you do that? Or, okay, Joel unmuted. Everyone else, go ahead and unmute. And feel free to turn on your cameras if you wish.
Colin, I had a question. Would you be able to provide the slides to everyone who are attending
Yes.
this? Thank you.
Yes, we can do that. All right, so you heard the scientist talk about his carbon nanotubes and volatile organic carbons. And you want to come up with a value statement. What is the problem? What's the solution? Who's the customer? And what's the value proposition? Any guesses? And just feel free to shout it out. And did everyone hear it? If maybe not everyone was able to hear it. I did test it beforehand. Apparently it worked well. So no answers? So we know when he talked about volatile organic carbons, that was the problem. And the solution were carbon nanotubes. So you can get that from from what the scientist was describing. But he spent a lot of time talking about how the carbon nanotubes were made and how they worked in terms of capturing volatile organic carbons. But he couldn't describe why anyone would care. He couldn't describe a case where a customer found volatile organic compounds to be a problem and would want their solution, because the focus was on mechanism. You know, he spent 9 years, I think he said 9 years working on it. And of course, all of that 9 years was optimizing that mechanism. So it worked really, really well. And while the customer, well, ultimately the fact that it works well is important to the customer, how he got there is not really important to the customer. Customer cares that it works. They don't really care why it works, as long as it works. So the challenge, if this was your technology that was in this competition, this carbon nanotubes to wrap around volatile organic carbons, if that was the technology, then your challenge would be not only to understand what this is, what the technology is, perhaps how it works in terms of wrapping up volatile organic carbons, but the real challenge is, who's the customer that cares? And why would they find this valuable? And then how can you portray that in a simple statement? So I'll give you the answer, because you could not get the answer from the way the scientist was describing it, right? But at the end of the day, after a lot of work, what happened was they had a simple, low-cost, environmentally safe additive, carbon nanotubes, but you don't need to say carbon nanotubes. It's just an additive that allows a paint manufacturer, that's a customer, to eliminate odors and irritation from their interior latex paints to easily create low VOC paints, low volatile organic carbon paints. So they found a market where volatile organic carbons were important. They found a customer in that market, and they found the value of this to the customer. It's a simple additive. It's low cost, it's environmentally safe. Those are all important marketing points for the paint manufacturer who wants to sell this to his customers for interior latex paints because they don't like the smell of standard paint. They want low VOC paint. That is an example of taking an excellent technology, but having to do all the work to figure out who's the customer, why is it valuable. But notice, this doesn't describe the technology, it doesn't describe how it works. There's no jargon, there's nothing about mechanism. It's just about what is it? What problem does it solve, which is VOC paints? And why is it valuable? It's simple, it's low cost, environmentally safe. So coming up with a value statement is really worthwhile. Coming up with simple, clear messages are important to be understood and also to be remembered. Just as an example of that, simple, clear messages. From the 2016 campaign for the US presidential election, there were two frontrunners. Does anyone remember the campaign slogan for this frontrunner?
Make America great again.
Excellent. You remember, right? It's simple, catchy, easy to remember. Plus, it's in the news all the time. Does anyone remember what this presidential candidate's election platform was? I didn't. I had to go look it up. Right. Make America Great Again. Campaign was about women's rights, raising middle-class incomes, campaign finance reform. We don't remember any of that. Simplicity and clarity, really important. In this case, none of this is true. That's a problem for credibility and an issue with maybe presidential elections, but you remember his message. The same is true in your pitch. Simplicity, clarity. Why is it valuable? How to make it memorable. All right, the live pitch finale, March 31st. Time limit's 5 minutes. You can use PowerPoint slides. I would recommend not having too many. A minimum of one person, obviously, has to pitch, but you can have multiple people pitch. My word of caution on that is make sure you practice those transitions. You don't want to lose time moving from one person to the next. You have a great hook, have a great story, have engage the listener's attention so they sit up and they go, oh, that's a big problem. Yeah, I want to solve that. Make sure they understand who the customer is, what do they need and why. What's the problem need? What's your technology? What are you bringing to the table? Why is it valuable to the customer? Why is it better than what's out there? How are you going to make money? Ultimately, why is this a good idea? And practice the pitch. And the opportunity comes up for you to practice in front of your local technology transfer office. Do that. We found that those groups that do a live rehearsal in front of their tech transfer office always have much better presentations. So really important, not only practice yourselves, but also take advantage of presenting to your local group and getting feedback and incorporating that feedback. It's really important. The judges are going to score it, and they're going to score it based on this. What's the problem in the market? Who's the customer or user? Did you describe that? Did you describe the value proposition? What's the technology and how does it allow for a product or service needed in the market? How does it get to market? And how is your performance? How do you engage? How do you answer questions? Was it stimulating? Was it fun to listen to? Did you grab my attention and keep it for the whole 5 minutes? Practice, practice, practice. And so I will give these slides to Jordan, who can send them out. It will include some resources for pitches and little tricks of the trade and how to learn more about pitching and about technology development. So a lot of these are YouTube videos, but some of them are other resources. And so that will all be available to you. Okay. So that is it. I'm happy to take questions if you have any questions. If I can't answer, then I'll pass it on to Jordan, who will get back to you. But hopefully you understand, what a pitch is, how it's structured, the purpose of a pitch and investment, how to, focus on those things that are most important, work on a value statement if you can. Get down to that one sentence description of your technology and its opportunity and why it's so great. And yeah, go from there. And have fun. I mean, pitching should be an enjoyable, fun event, right? Any questions?
Yeah, I have one. So you mentioned there's some pretty major differences between pitching to investors like family and friends and all the way up to venture capitals. How should we treat our audience in this pitch? Should we treat the
So
people
you're-
that we're pitching to in this as if they are venture capitalists?
Yeah, you want to treat them as if they're venture capitalists, but the difference is, they know this is a pitch competition. And so their expectations are not the same as if they were real venture capitalists.
Mhm.
There might be real venture capitalists in the audience. And so they're looking for that, the overall understanding of the technology and how it fits into the market.
Okay.
Usually when you pitch to an investor, the really detailed information about how you get to market, that's usually well worked out. But in this case, you will not have had the opportunity to work that out. Right? So the expectation that you fully understand that is not there. That's really the main difference, right? You don't necessarily have that milestone timeline budget slide as if you were pitching to investors, right? Because you haven't had the opportunity to do that. Of course, if you do have that, bonus points, but I don't think that expectation is there.
Okay, thank you.
Can we include additional analysis, or should we just stick to our written part of the business plan?
You got 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes to convince someone it's a great idea. You'll be judged. So your business plans are already judged. And you will be judged on the performance of your pitch in the way I described. And so there'll be no opportunity for judges to look at extra information. If you want to present something that is important, go ahead, right? If you can fit it, you got 5 minutes. You can present anything you wish. If there's an important point to be made, absolutely, go ahead and make it. But if you're thinking like there's an appendix or something like that, there isn't. I will say you can sometimes anticipate what a judge may ask you, and you may have that as a backup slide, guessing that they're going to ask it. If they don't ask it, then you don't have to show it. But if they do ask it, then you have that slide ready. So it is okay to have backup slides. You're not going to show them unless you're addressing a question to which they apply.
Hi, I have a quick admin question.
Okay.
On your slides, it said that the PowerPoint slides are due on the 24th of March, but on the website it says March 28th.
Sorry, go with March 28th.
Okay, thank you.
That just means I didn't change the date on those slides. I thought I caught all the dates. Any other questions? Does everybody, I assume many people have pitched before. You probably understand the whole thing. This is just for extra information, but any other questions or comments? Did I go too fast? Is there anything you want me to go over?
I have a quick question about pitching to your local office. Is there someone like specific? I'm from a Western team. Is there someone specific we should reach out to?
I'll get the details from Jordan. I think that the local office will reach out to the teams and say, we're trying to arrange for your practice pitch. And they should reach out to you. And my suggestion is to fully take advantage of it.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I will double check with Jordan. Is that it? If that's it, if there's no more questions, I can hang around a little bit, but otherwise I'll end the presentation. All right, well, thanks everyone. And good luck in your practices and good luck in the pitch competition. It should be a fun event. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, you're welcome.